And now, to kick off the main stage, welcome one of the most influential people in the meetings industry, founder and former CEO of Social Tables, Don Berger. Wish that I could stay forever this young. Not afraid to close my eyes. Hello, Edmonton. You guys think I'm here to speak for a conference, but I moved to Canada because I'm sick of the United States. It is, so it's actually quite special for me to be here today because it's the first time I'm ever speaking as not the CEO of Social Tables. So I'm feeling a bit nostalgic, seeing many familiar faces, and a bit nervous because now I don't have an entire company reputation to sit on my shoulders, but I have my own. So hopefully this will meet your expectations, and I'm sure it will. It's gonna be a fast-paced session, but before I do anything, I wanna just tell you about myself in case you don't know who I am. First and foremost, I'm a participant. I've been going to meetings and events my entire life, whether it was protesting when I was a young kid in college, or whether I was going to music festivals in my 20s and still do. I'm also a planner. So just by show of hands, where are the planners in the house? Awesome. There's about 50% of you who are planners, and I'm a planner. I used to run an association and did about 30 programs a year, so I've been in your shoes. I'm also an entrepreneur. This slide used to say I'm a supplier, but I'm no longer a supplier to the industry. And I've come to terms with the fact I'm now an entrepreneur who started a business, moved on from it, and is now working on new businesses. And finally, I'm a believer. I really believe in the power of meetings and events. And everything I do every single day, whether it's Social Tables or what I'm working on now, it's related to the power of community and what happens when we sit face to face. Because as we see today, we'll realize that this is very treasured and is becoming very endangered. So now that I've told you a little bit about me, I want to walk you through the rules of the road. What will we do today in 30 minutes? We're going to talk about trends backed by data. I'm not going to give you my opinion. I'm going to give you what is happening and then give you my opinion. We'll do micro predictions that are built off those trends. We'll then talk about the predictions built off of those predictions. So in other words, we'll see what's happening and then we'll see what will happen. And then I'll cover what I call macro predictions. We have 10 years ahead of us in the next decade. There'll be 10 big macro predictions. But I want to give you a couple notes. First, this is not meant to scare you. It's meant to expand your mind. In other words, I'm going to say some things that are pretty controversial. You might think, what does that mean for my job? What does it mean for my business? But instead, I want you to think, what does it mean for me and my future? What does it mean for my career? How can I become a better employee, a better worker, a better citizen? And then finally, I want to just note that a lot of this data is US-based, but a lot of it is also global. So we'll use the US as an analogy to Canada, but it's certainly, we know it's much better. Okay, so here we go. The data here consolidates hundreds of studies. It's got 43 slides, 42 trends, 10 big predictions, and 30 minutes. You guys ready to go? All right, awesome. So let's start talking about the hotel industry. The hotel industry, like the global economy, has really not seen any resting period. 2019 held steady in terms of investments, and you can see that's been the same pretty much for most of the last decade. When it comes to convention hotels, we're actually seeing a decrease in the number of new convention hotels that are going online. In 2019, only 5 new convention hotels went up online. So where are the hotels going? If the supply is increasing, what kind of supply is being added? Well, the reality is it's mostly happening in the limited and select service, or different people call it mainstream brands, whatever you want to call it. It's the upscale, upper mid-scale, upper upscale, or mid-scale, upper upscale, or whatever that thing says at the bottom. But it's pretty much the non-luxury and the non-extended stay. And that's about 75% of the US inventory that's going up online in terms of new hotels. So in other words, 3 out of 4 hotels is a Holiday Inn. It's a Courtyard. It's a Hilton Garden, an HGI, Hilton Garden Inn. And for those who work in the room in hotels, who works in hotels? Show of hands. Okay. There's about 10% of you or so. You all know what I'm about to say is true. Owners have never been more hands-on than they are today. And that's because they're becoming more sophisticated. They get the reports and the dashboards at the tip of their fingers. The chains are paying more attention to limited and select service, as I mentioned, because they realize that they can release them for cheaper and in more places. And hotels are generally becoming more interested in group business that are smaller in size. And what I think is going to happen is really 2019 was the last year we'll see this kind of change in the industry. So we're going to enter a downturn, and it's been a seller's market for the past roughly decade. That's going to change in 2020 and beyond. So all this means a buyer's market, planners have much more power. And hotels are suddenly going to have to start negotiating against themselves to win. Let's move to food and beverage. The first option when you go to Chipotle, if you actually notice, the folks working there automatically reach for the chicken and not for the steak or the pork. And that's because, in general, chicken sales have increased while beef and other products have decreased. So we're eating more chicken and less beef. And the US is actually an outlier when it comes to beef production. Although Canada, I know, is a big producer of beef. And the US is a big customer of beef. The reality is that we consume way more, we Americans consume way more beef than most of the world. And alternative meats are picking up. Beyond Meat, the makers of Impossible Burger just hit a new high this morning, and it contains about $120 a stock. It was $200 a few months ago. So alternative meats are becoming a thing, and we are going to start seeing them at events. And the reality is that the same thing is happening in beer. So if you look at beer consumption has now reached less than 50% of alcohol consumption. So those fizzy drinks, those sparkling drinks, the Trulies, and spirits are increasing in sales. And all this means is that every aspect of food and beverage is being challenged. So local fast casual concepts will take place instead of big restaurants. Nowadays, when you open up a restaurant in a hotel, you have to think about, oh, what kind of product are we going to put in that hotel? Well, we're going to start seeing more and more fast casual options in hotels. CBD-infused drinks will appear on beverage menus. Lab-grown meats will replace more traditional options. Some events will be alcohol-free to cater to the sober, curious attendees. And I just want to put a note there. So right now what I'm doing on my spare time, my work time, is I'm producing a music festival. And we have this concept called villages. And one of our villages is actually focused on sober, curious, and sober attendees. Because there are a lot of people that want to go to events and they don't want to get wasted, especially as they get older and they have families and they have responsibilities. So having sober areas in terms of a village when it comes to lodging is one option we've been exploring. So most events will become meatless and many alcohol-free. And consider a world where food may even be optional. So imagine for a second your boss tells you you need to have a board meeting and you have to have a whole day and you have to go 8 hours roughly, but you have to go through 12 hours of agenda. I'd cut the lunch and I'd replace the lunch with a smoothie or something else that gives people energy but helps them work through it. So maybe there's a world where in 10 years' time we're drinking something, a meal replacement, or we're swallowing a meal replacement as opposed to eating, and we now can have 1 extra hour of productivity. That's an interesting one, isn't it? The reason, yeah, chefs are booing. The reason why, so if you think about food and beverage, it's one of the highest costs of events. If we cut that out, we decrease budgets and we increase productivity. So while food can bring us together, the challenge we have for ourselves then is how can we bring each other together in different ways? So instead of thinking, oh my God, the number one way of getting people together through eating, well, let's replace that with something else that's more efficient and more productive and more cost saving, and produces more cost savings. I'll continue. Consumers are more concerned about their personal data. If you look at the numbers, about 40% of individuals say that they're really concerned about their data. And when you ask them who they're concerned about Facebook, they're concerned about Twitter, they're concerned about where data is going and what's being used with it. So there's actually an increased regulation right now in the United States. All the big tech firms are being asked to testify in front of hearings to talk about what they're doing with their data. And if the administration changes in the United States, that's more likely going to take center stage. So that's happening while at the same time we say we hate Facebook, we say we hate our data being used, and yet we spend an obscene amount of time in front of digital media. In fact, the average American spends 6.3 hours in front of digital media. Okay, that's a quarter of your day spent on a computer, a tablet, or a phone, or TV. So we hate it, but we use more of it. That's ironic. And what happens when we spend more and more time in front of digital media, we actually spend less time doing this. And when you ask people, well, actually, I'm going to talk about that a little later, but I'll just mention it right now. When you ask people, how do you feel about these platforms, they have really visceral reactions to them. They hate them. They realize that they're using their data and making money. And there's this old saying in tech that says, if you don't know what the product is, it's you, right? If you don't know who the product is, it's you. So what the product is, it's you. So in Facebook, for example, the actual customer is not you, it's the advertiser. And that only means that privacy standards are set to increase. So GDPR has been obviously a huge thing in Europe. That kind of regulation will become the global norm. Device-free events will be welcomed and enforced. I don't know if you saw, there's impeachment, the impeachment trial in the US Senate right now. They created this cubby system for senators to deposit their cell phone on the way to the hearings. So, and I went to see Dave Chappelle. They made me take my phone away. Where we're doing our festival, the phone doesn't even work. So device-free events will be welcomed and enforced because we're spending so much time on them, and because they take away from the fact that we're not creating those connections. And at the same time, events will be the target of hackers and bad actors. Because imagine if you set up a Wi-Fi network, you really don't have the time or resources to test it and make sure it's foolproof. So a smart hacker can come and say, oh, I want to go to Davos and take the information of everybody connected to the internet. And then finally, some attendees will choose to be anonymous or badgeless. This reminds me a bit, they always say that history repeats itself. For those of you who've been on the internet for a long time, a lot of people like me love the internet because it was a place you can be anonymous, where your name on a platform was, mine was Octane, or, somebody else might be Fairy Godmother, and it wasn't Don Berger. And the reason we like that is because it obfuscated the reality, our real identity. We don't have that anymore. Our Instagram names, our Facebook names are all associated with our identities. And the same thing happens at events. I see people with badges, right? But what if you want to go to an event where people are anonymous, or people go by a handle? So consider events that are anonymous, where people opt in to reveal their identity. So what does this all mean? It means attendees' privacy and expectations will continue to increase, and we need to meet those demands. Let's talk about employers. Employers are embracing remote work. 52% of employees work remote about at least one day a week, and that's only increasing. And I'm seeing that because the staff that I have now is much younger and much more versatile and nomadic. A lot of people in their 20s are talking about this sabbatical, right? A 3-month or 6-month remote work program. Some companies like Uber offer workations where you fly somewhere and work. So employers are embracing it, while at the same time, the freelance economy is growing. About 56 million Americans had a freelance job in 2018. And 10 years ago, I think it's roughly 10% of Americans made a living off of eBay, just selling something off of eBay. So freelance can mean many things. It doesn't just mean that you do work for different clients. It can mean you might have a side hustle or a side gig. So co-working is really the new normal. And if co-working is the new normal, then we need to adjust to it when it comes to events. Pop-up co-working spaces will become the norm in events. Hotels will offer co-working amenities as they transform their lifestyle products. Events will be seen as a key tool to engage remote employees, because imagine if you have a remote workforce and you have your annual sales kickoff or your annual user conference, that's really the only time that your remote workers can engage your physical workers. So you need to start thinking about events as not just engaging the audience that you had in mind, your customers or your partners, but also your employees. And new meeting formats will be created to better include a remote workforce. So all this means is that planners will integrate co-working and remote attendance into their programs. Doing all right? Doing good? All right, awesome. Let's talk about Facebook again. More than half of Americans think that Facebook will do more harm than good. Compare that to how they feel about Google, Microsoft, or Amazon, or Apple. So in 10 years, most people say that Facebook and other digital media platforms will have a net negative impact on society. In fact, if you look at the number of people that have blocked somebody on a social media platform, it's about 1/3 of individuals block people. And another third of individuals say that using social media has actually changed the way they interact with people in real life, right? Maybe you stop talking to somebody because they posted something that pissed you off. While at the same time, so Facebook is kind of like the place where we're friends, where we meet our friends online. But this entire new type of meeting has emerged over the past roughly decade and a half of community events. Community events are different than regular events. They're basically a collection of people who are like-minded, who share an affinity or an interest. And meetup.com has really shepherded this new movement, right? If you go to meetup.com, there's 250,000 meetups on it every single month. 40 million RSVPs to meetups every single year. This entire community meeting didn't really exist, with the exception of your local book club or your knitting club or your bingo club or whatever you go to. So Meetup introduced this new type of meeting called the community event. And right now there is tens of thousands of them happening. If I'm a supplier, I'm thinking to myself, how do I attract these and bring them to fill up the space that I need, that kind of Wednesday night or Sunday evening when I need to fill up my meeting space and it's the emptiest. So this is a bit old because I couldn't find new data, although I now have access to it. The reality is that the number of community events has exponentially grown over the past decade. And the reason for that is because all of us are seeking, I'm going to go back one slide real quick. All of us are seeking a new type of connectedness and community, and these offer it. Now, a lot of people go to work because they seek that connectedness and community and belonging. And employee engagement actually shows, the data shows, that when employees are engaged, there's a net positive income on all the things we care about: productivity, sales, profitability, quality of work. And there's a net negative impact on the things that we hate, like turnover and absenteeism and property loss. So when people are disengaged, they stop giving a crap and they start being bad actors. So for that reason, employee events are really, really important because they increase the engagement level that employees have. And the biggest secret I have out of my entire 8 years of running social tables is that I built the culture we had off the back of events. We had a company award show. We had a monthly all-hand meeting. We had a family weekend where we invited the families of employees to come spend time with us and so they can learn about the company. It was those employee engagement events that increased our engagement and strengthened our culture. So in the future, and again, if I'm a planner, I'm thinking to myself, okay, how do I engage HR professionals? HR is going to start devoting more resources to employee events because of how critical they are to employee engagement. So internal events are going to be more important than external events. So you're going to start thinking more about your annual award show as you are about your user conference, as an example. Employers will provide event planning training for employees. I think this is so critical and nobody thinks about it. At the end of the day, we are all event planners, whether it's in our title or not, because we plan family reunions in our social lives, we plan sales meetings in our corporate lives, we plan dinner parties for our friends. Event planning is one of those jobs that everyone does, like sales, but is not in our title. So if we just took a minute to provide our employees, not us in event planning, but we as a global generation, to provide employees how to actually run a meeting, how to actually create an event, we would see much more productive workforces and more engaged workforces. So here's a random idea. If you're an event planner, maybe offer a service to local companies to train them on how to do event planning. Events will be viewed as perks that win the war on talent. People will start choosing to go work somewhere because they have events that they like and that they've seen on Instagram or they've seen or they've heard about from their friends. And this is something I'm so passionate about and why I'm so passionate about community. The reason why I'm passionate about community, whether it's through this event, or which is, by the way, the best regional conference I've ever been to, and I've been to all of them, whether it's this event, whether it's your your weekly happy hour, or whatever it is. People go to events to have community. We know that, that's obvious. But that doesn't really mean anything. What it gives people is a sense of belonging. That's why associations are as old as history, right? Getting people together who share a common interest. That sense of belonging is missing as we spend more time, and hopefully you're starting to see the pattern, as we spend more and more time on digital media, as we spend less and less time face to face. That sense of belonging we get from being together is missing. And events that provide people a sense of belonging and thus create community is what will win. And I can't stress that enough. Moving on. New digital supply channels for group business continue to emerge. So you may have not heard of any of these outlets, and that's okay because they're all they come and go. But the reality is that every week there's a new internet site that pops up to try to aggregate all the venues out there and tries to win your proposals, win your RFPs, win your business. And hotel sales and marketing for groups is becoming more complex because there's more options. So as a hotel sales and marketing person, I would have to just go to one channel or make a series of phone calls in order to close my business. But now I can go to dozens of channels to try to source business. And that becomes harder and harder for us to do our jobs on the sales and marketing side because there's inbound requests from all kinds of places. And planners shop in more places. So suppliers will start to proactively reach out to well-suited planners thanks to better tools. So imagine for a second if you're in charge of sourcing at a hotel or a venue and you need to find group business for your hotel. Well, there's going to be technology, and there already is technology, that tells you how to reach your audience and who your audience should be. Hotels will introduce direct bookings for groups. So this is big news that happened late last year. The biggest hotel chains, Marriott, Hilton, and a couple others got together and said, we're building a digital sourcing and booking channel. So they said that they're sick of other channels like Cvent taking their business. They're sick of third parties like Helms Briscoe taking their commission. And they said, we're going to build our own channel. And they invested about $40 million into a platform that does this. So now these technology companies are not just going to compete against each other, they're going to start competing against a conglomerate hotel supply channel. I don't think they will, my opinion is that it probably won't be successful because they tried to do this on the room side and it didn't work. It's something called Room Key many years ago that didn't work, but we'll see what happens here. They're doing it now through a technology company as opposed to on their own, so it might be a little more successful. Unsophisticated hotel sales reps, so people who are not growing, not going to this conference, not learning, are the people who are going to lose their jobs. People who are not continuing to push themselves to become focused on whatever is needed right now are going to end up in different roles. Take, for example, the cashier at the airport that I experienced yesterday. There was no cashier, right? It's now automated checkout machines. And the cashier that was really good at customer service moved on to be a customer service rep, and the cashier that was really bad lost their job. So, and then finally, non-traditional hospitality brands will become more vertically integrated to compete. So what does that mean? Right now, you need a lot of different offerings in order to compete for your business, your event planning business. Vertically integrated means you offer everything. You offer the venue, you offer the sleeping rooms, you offer the food and beverage, you offer the services, you offer the AV, etc. So hotels have done this, right? They say, well, we have everything you need. We're a one-stop shop, right? It's an event in a box. But companies that that have venues or companies that have services might say, well, we want to jump into these other categories. So in summary, there will be more ways to source groups and meetings. So if I'm an event planner, I'm thinking to myself, okay, how am I staying up to date with all the different inventory that's out there? And if I'm a hotelier, I'm thinking to myself, how do I get listed? Or a hotelier is a catch-all for venue manager, et cetera. If I'm on the venue side, I'm thinking to myself, how do I get listed in these other channels? And how do I automate the listing of that so I'm not constantly updating every single system? And I have thoughts on doing that. If you want to chat, I'm happy to. I'm staying here the rest of the afternoon. Let's talk about technology and robotics. So the reality is that most physical work that's predictable can be done with a machine today. So this is the kind of complicated chart, but the bottom line is that right now, of predictable physical work, right? So 18%, look at the bottom bar, 18% of jobs have predictable physical work, something that you can do over and over again. 78% of that, so roughly 1 out of every 5 things we do is predictable, and about 80% of that predictable work can be automated today with a robot. So basically, anything predictable, and soon enough, things that are not that predictable can be automated with a robot. So technology is really upgrading every step in the event planning process. And what that means is that automation will give event planners time to be more creative, time to spend with each other, time to build relationships, and not time to create another spreadsheet or create another deck or send another email. And simple proposals will be automated while more robust ones will start costing money. So many of you are probably sick of creating proposals and not getting paid for them. If you go to some caterers today, they actually charge for tasting and they deduct that from your fee if you go with them. The same thing happens with interior designers. You go to a designer, they might charge you a fee and they might deduct it if you actually choose them. Why not do that as if you're an event planner and say, my proposal is going to cost you money and I will deduct that. And that's always negotiable, by the way. You can say, you know what, that's fine. You're really important to me. I'm not going to charge you. Just so you know, I usually charge $500 for my proposals. There's nothing wrong with building value through proposals because a lot of work goes into proposals. Hotels and meeting planners will choose consolidated event management platforms. Right now you have a platform for audience response, a platform for ticketing, a platform for mailing, a platform for customer relationship management, etc. One event management platform is where things will go, just like they did with Salesforce, where people chose Salesforce for everything, marketing automation, CRM, help desk software, etc. Virtual site visits will augment site visits. A lot of people say, oh, we won't have site visits anymore. That's not going to happen, but they'll certainly be augmented by virtual or augmented reality site visits. And program and attendee lists will be automated thanks to recommendation engines. So imagine a world where you have to create a program and you're like, geez, I don't know what to do. I'm sick of copying last year's program. Well, what if there was software that actually recommended to you what your program should be? What if you actually chose a random sample of 100 attendees from your conference, saw what skills they have on LinkedIn, and asked them to speak, right? What if you actually were able to pick the time of your meeting based off of an algorithm as opposed to 20 meetings? Floor plans, it's my thing, floor plans, there it is. Floor plans will be more unique thanks to machine learning. So imagine a world where there's a software, maybe social tables, maybe something else, where it takes all the floor plans ever created and makes recommendations of what the floor plan for your event should be, instead of you thinking about, oh, how do we change it from last year? If I had $1 for every time a hotel copied last year's program, I would, well, I hate that phrase. If I had a sandwich, no. My point is that our work involves a lot of duplication, right? Copying last year's program, copying last year's floor plan. What if there was a way to automate that by putting it into some sort of system that will give you the best possible floor plan? And robots will replace a lot of hotel staff and event staff. Security, banqueting, etc. can be replaced with robots where humans start monitoring and managing those machines. Technology will augment the way we plan for the better. Okay, the middle class is growing globally. So basically, more people have money in their pocket, mostly thanks to the digital revolution. So that means that there's new ways to travel will open up to new possibilities because the middle class can now start travel all over the world. They can start afford to travel. So if the middle class is expanding, that means your prospective attendee base is increasing, right? Because your supply is increasing. More people can go to your events. And home sharing will add new inventory in areas with limited hotel supply. So imagine a city that only has 10 hotels, has suddenly 1,000 apartments up online that it can use for home sharing. So that it increases your total room supply in a city. And driverless vehicles can get us to destinations without having to drive, so we can spend time working, going somewhere, as opposed to staring at the road. And now I can spend a little more time going somewhere because I don't mind because the car is driving for me. So all this means that secondary markets will now compete with traditional ones. So maybe a secondary market that you may have not heard of will become a secondary market because it has new room options and new venue options and new ways to get there. And last mile commuting vehicles will ease clogged arteries during events. So right now, in order to get to the convention center during a very big event, it takes a lot of work, right? You have to either walk or you have to hop in a cab or get an Uber. There's surge pricing. What if scooters were provided to every attendee when they got to their hotel so they can use a scooter to get to the event, as an example? So events will be more accessible both in terms of attendance and location. We'll have more people who seek belonging and community, and they'll have more disposable income to spend, and they can go to more places. Wrapping up, there's a gap between what businesses say and what millennials believe. So most businesses say, oh, we're about doing good, we're about giving back, and all this other bullshit. Well, the reality is they actually don't do it. But younger workers are seeing through that, and they're making employment choices based off of that. And new voices are entering the industry. Every event will consider diversity and inclusion from planning committee to the program itself. So as an example, now even on DJ lineups, we're looking at diversity and inclusion to make sure that there are women DJs, there are underrepresented minorities on even lineups and festivals. So if you are thinking about a new career and you meet the criteria, you should become a DJ. Organizations will take a strong stance on social justice issues impacting their programs. They might choose to boycott places like Salesforce boycotted in Indianapolis because of its marriage law. And leave no trace that a concept that started in Burning Man is going to become an industry standard. Or LNT if you want to be cool. The next generation's values will be reflected in the way we plan, is basically what I'm trying to say. And my last one, because I'm also at time, is staying relevant be more difficult. And that's why going to conferences like this is so important. More last minute purchases means just-in-time planning. Everybody's buying things last minute, right? Amazon Prime, it comes in this afternoon. Going to an event, oh, I just decided I'm gonna go to an event next week that is a $3,000 conference. I really didn't do that, but people will start making decisions like that because they'll have more choices. So we have to start adjusting to just-in-time purchases. Successful events will subcontract content from specialized frenemies. So because there are more and more people creating events, we need to start partnering with people that we may have not thought of partnering with. So for example, it's always funny to me that Salesforce owns the best sales conference in the world. It's a software company. They shouldn't own the best sales conference in the world. The Association of Sales Professionals should own the best sales conference in the world, not a corporation. That doesn't make any sense. But Salesforce won, and we have to adjust. So if I'm Salesforce, I'm thinking, how do I get content from places that I usually consider an enemy or a frenemy? Unconventional organizations will enter the event planning business. LinkedIn is a good example. Microsoft is another good example because they want to bring their community online, offline. So they might start creating events and compete with user conferences or associations. And most activations at events, instead of being stations, will be mobile because people will want to experience things, not just going to it, but it coming to them. And if I can enter any slide, this is the slide to end on, that event organizers will need to be more flexible than ever. And hopefully in today's talk, I gave you a sense of why that is and inspire you to make some changes in your professional lives. I've been to this conference many times and I'm always humbled to come back. So thank you very much for the invitation and congratulations on an exceptional program. Thank you very much.
Hey, hey, hey.